Ladies and gentlemen, today is July 21st, 2012, and today is the KNKL Show, episode 44, where today we are going to be practicing colors and values and bringing out silhouettes, as well as a little bit of a bonus on backgrounds, creating backgrounds for your characters. But before we get into that, I'm going to check my teeth because I was just eating a burrito and make sure I don't have bean fragments in there. We're going to take a stroll down lovely lane here. Yes, that's right. It is the Facebook. Thank you once again to everyone who has submitted over the last week, and thank you to those who have been commenting and giving your words of encouragement to your fellow artists and such. And oh, by the way, I checked out these awesome comics. You guys should check these out. These are very, very inspiring, kind of cool little comics that will inspire you and make you look at life a little differently. So with that, we move on to the Twitter. For those of you who are not following, please follow because I will post videos not when I am walking the dog or riding my bike because I don't usually do any of those. I might blog when I might tweet when I am at the pool because I love swimming. And speaking of that, we have the KNKL pool party coming up tomorrow, the usual server time, Ysera, 10 o'clock. So be there. It's free. Bring your friends. I posted a video yesterday of pretty much the cool antics and stuff that we do on Sunday night. So yeah, make sure to come to that and follow me on Twitter. Now with that out of the way, we're going to move on to the awesome time-lapse. I actually made another time-lapse today just for you. Just for you. Let's see. Where's the best place for me to be? Probably down here. Yeah. Okay, so I'm basically just going to be talking you through this. You guys may be familiar with this. I was actually working on it back, I think, back in like the episode, the 20s. Back in the 20s. So today we are going to basically be continuing forward with this. We're going to be changing the color palette, as you'll see. Basically, I'll change the whole color palette here. This was an alternate kind of thing that I did. I didn't time-lapse it, unfortunately, but you can see basically it's simple. I just kind of turned his face green. I noticed some things about Maokai that, like with his colors, that I didn't want to lose. So I decided to go ahead and put those back in there, and I wanted to kind of start playing around with the background. You'll notice that I changed the background, and I might end up just pausing a couple times here throughout the video to basically explain what is going through my mind. And it's actually kind of hard to talk over these time-lapses, but I will do my best. And it seems that's weird. You'd think it would be easier because I'm not actually drawing anything. But as you can see up here, I decided, one of the first things I decided to do was to make the top darker and have it gradate down to a lighter color down here. Now the reason I did this was because I wanted the light on his little branch thing to appear more bright. And the way that you make things appear more bright is contrast it with a dark behind it. So that's kind of the first thing I decided to do. And then I wanted the light coming out of there to be purple or kind of like a pinkish color. And you'll see I'm going to start introducing some more blues. I'm going to actually turn this into more of a night scene. Kind of make it kind of like he's like keeping, maybe the sapling is scared and he's keeping it occupied by like showing him the light or something. I don't know, something cute like that. So you can see me throwing in the colors, basically kind of picking out my color palette. I'm going to be using a lot of cool colors, like all these blues back in here, the purples, a little bit of like these tealish greens. You can see it actually even goes blue, like in his face. And you can see what I'm actually doing here is I'm going through and I'm coloring the lines. And right there, you saw it actually turned gray for a second. Here, let me pause it on that. I'm going to show you guys exactly how to do this. And the reason why it turns gray like that is because I've made a layer right there, which is all black, and then I set things to color. And what this does is it basically shows you, it takes away all the color from the piece, and it just shows you in black and white what your values are. And this is where we go into the values, and basically I'm going to tell you how it works. Okay, so the way that I look at values is things that are closer to you, you're always going to want them to be a darker value, like the shadows. The shadows of anything that is closer to you is always going to appear darker because it's not being obscured by the atmosphere and the light behind it. So like, say this tree stump arm here, right, is going to be much darker than behind it. And then his little gimpy arm is actually going to be even lighter because it's even further in the background, you know, back here. So, or rather, back here. So that's the basic idea of value. The second idea of value is silhouette. And that is, you want to make sure that the colors and the values of those colors that you're using behind the character, see I was adjusting it right there, you want to make sure it brings out the silhouette and that the form that you're trying to communicate is coming through clearly. If the colors behind it are too similar, like you can see the lights here, if there was a light color behind there, it might be a little bit harder to see the shape that's being formed here. So I'm trying to basically control the values of the colors to make sure that the piece is coming through and communicating properly. So now I'm going through and just adding, I've already begun the overpaint layer. This is a little bit different than the techniques that I use when I'm working at Riot. It's because I consider myself to be a little bit more of a free kind of a free artist. Like there we tend to work a little bit more constrained and like what's the word? The work has to be a little bit neater, I guess you could say. But here, I like to, my style I feel is a lot more experimental and loose and a little bit more free. So I kind of like doing that. Now one thing I do want to point out right here is you can look and see how these are all conscious choices that I'm making. I'm working with very desaturated colors, but I'm choosing the temperatures properly. Well, I mean, I wouldn't say properly, but I'm choosing them purposefully. So, for example, you can see like this blue highlight, and then it goes to like a greenish because it's kind of like a little bit of the local color underneath his head, or underneath his underneath like the rooty part. It's more like mossy and green around his face. But then it fades to like this reddish shadow, and the reason I do that is usually when I'm drawing faces, I like to have any shadows like go more to red because it gives you the illusion that it's more alive when the shadows are red. And this is probably due mostly because due to the fact that when light hits your skin, it reflects. It goes in and then it bounces around all the little blood vessels, and then it actually refracts like a reddish kind of glow. And that's called subsurface scattering. And even though he's a tree and he has bark and probably wouldn't be that much of that going on, it's still kind of cool to simulate a little bit of it, just to show that he's alive. He's a living creature. So yeah, but I guess if you were to get scientific about it, you would just take whatever color the blood is within that creature. Like say it's like some orc or something and it has green blood. Then you could make the subsurface, or kind of like the saturation, turn more of a green, or the shadows would turn more green as opposed to red. I don't know if I've ever like seen anybody do that or anybody like experiment with that, but it would be really cool to communicate what color the subsurface is just by changing the shadows. I'd love to see that. So anyway, that's going off on a whole nother tangent. Let's get back to the video here. So you can see I am basically just cleaning up the lights and just making sure that everywhere where this light would be shining, is being hit, basically being affected by it. And this is one of the biggest ways that you can communicate light. And this brings me to my next point, which is wherever you choose your light sources to be, make sure that they're consistent throughout the entire piece. Like for example, you got this pinkish purple light right here, right? And then I have a backlight, a second light that's bringing out the shapes of these branches, and that's like a blue kind of maybe moonlight, coming from that direction. And then I have like this front ambient, which is also kind of a bluish, and it's mostly just for like the green rooty parts. But the biggest way to sell any sort of light in your piece is to have it be consistent, throughout the thing, and make sure that it shows. Like if there's cast shadows, then make sure you render those, and I'll probably show you a few of those here. But a buddy of mine once told me, it's like the difference between a cartoon and a realistic painting is literally like 90% cast shadows and reflected light. So that really kind of stuck with me, and it made a lot of sense because especially cast shadows, I've learned, is once you start showing that, like see, for example, in here, see this leather strap and this ring, it's casting a shadow down into here, and it's communicating that form, that it's not just straight across, showing that it goes down and then up. It's almost like these little kind of rooty, muscly looking things. So you can show form by how the shadows get cast across it. So, and you can see like these roots that kind of come up from the back side of his head are casting a shadow back here. And again, consistently, I was going to say consistent. I meant to say consistency, but I said consistently. Consistently render your lights coming from the same direction. Like, see, there's blue light here, so there would be a little bit of blue light being caught here. So you can see I'm basically showing where these lights are coming from. And it looks believable because it's consistent throughout the whole piece. Now what I'm doing is I'm going in and I'm rendering out these speculars. And basically what that's doing is I'm desaturating and going to the upper left-hand corner of the color picker thing. And I can show you a little bit more of that. I actually went into a little bit of detail on that with the how to blend colors and the ribbon painting, the Bunny Girl ribbon painting. And that's basically all I'm doing here. Now see, this is another thing right here. You notice how I dropped in those blue lights behind here? That was a conscious decision because, here, I'll play it again. See, before, a good way to test out how your values are working is to squint your eyes, right? Notice how those roots back here are kind of fading into the back arm or whatever that form is. So in order to correct that and kind of bring out the roots of his chin, I decided to drop that blue behind there. And then you see, once you squint your eyes again, you can clearly see that shape behind there. And I'll actually end up going in and making it even brighter. And also, there's a reason for that blue light to be there because of the blue light here. You know, it could easily hit there, as well as the pink light from the lantern could be shining down and hitting there. So always make sure that, I mean, sometimes I cheat things and just be like, I need a brighter color there, and I'll just throw it in. And then I can either, like, throw in another light source of where that would be coming from, or sometimes it'll just work and be like, oh yeah, I have a light over there that's blue. And I can just bring it down onto here and bring out that form and lighten that value. So that way the silhouette and the form comes out more clearly. Man, I hope this is making sense. I'm explaining it the best I can. So now all I'm doing is I'm going in and just rendering out some fine details. Like I kind of like to go in and add a little bit of texture, a little bit of speculars, just to kind of communicate the texture and kind of what material Maokai is made out of. I always saw his face as being very like mossy and kind of shiny and rooty looking, whereas his body would become more matte and bark-like. And if I had some more time, I would really like to go into this. See, there I am again, putting the gray layer on, checking my values. If I had more time, I would really like to go into this and really like examine how to create like that matte bark effect. And I could, and I go in and do a little bit of this, but overall I think the best way to communicate material, I think, is how the lights react with it. So just having less specular on the bark, like in here, and just having it kind of just gray and kind of desaturated colors. You can see I'm just kind of putting in little little effects to suggest the bark. Yes, suggest the bark. And that's pretty much how I would start it, you know? Just have the rooty, mossy parts be more shiny, and then have the other parts be more matte, which means basically there's more tiny surfaces in it that won't reflect it. It's not as shiny, basically. There's a whole another lesson we could do on, like, and quite frankly, there's a lot of lessons probably on YouTube that would probably explain it better than me, just about matte and shiny surfaces and kind of how the light reacts with it and how it basically looks to your eye. But if you guys would want to see something like that from me, then just let me know in the comments, and I could do my best to explain it to you. But that's when you start getting into like the science of stuff, and it gets really nerdy. And yeah, I don't know if you guys would be up for that. You might all be sleeping by the end of that. You'd be like, but anyway. Back to the video once again. Okay, so you can see what I'm doing here is this is a really cool trick I learned recently. If you create a lighten layer on top of the current layer, and then you want to lighten up the shadows, like look in here. I lightened up these shadows to lighten the value to push it further in the background. Push it further in the background. That way the arm seems closer to us, obviously, and then the back, you know, seems farther. And what's cool about it is when you create a lighten layer, it'll only lighten the shadows, like depending on what color you pick. I picked kind of like this brownish kind of desaturated brown. And then I'm just kind of going through and kind of scrubbing through the shadows and picking out where I want to make them lighter. Yeah. So now you can see, squint your eyes, and you can start to see all the forms. And kind of like the clusters of the highlights, I think, is another big thing that communicates the form. You can still see what's going on and how the form of Maokai is rendered just through his little highlights there. So now we are going into the bonus content, which is going to be how to create a background that complements your character and helps with the flow. And the biggest thing I want to point out right here is, in this picture, I wanted to make it look like you were looking up at Maokai, right? Like he's above you. And a really good way to reinforce that you are looking up, indeed, is to have, like, the perspective lines are going up like this, right? So you notice I threw in these trees to sort of reinforce the perspective that's happening there. And now it really looks like you are below him and looking up. So that's kind of a quick little tidbit for you as far as tips and tricks. And then the other thing is, if you remember back when we were studying the rocks and how atmosphere affects objects as they go into the distance, that was back with Roger and his clownfish cousin, whatever his name was. But yeah, it's really cool. Once you get far enough back into the background like this, see here, this is actually a tree, right? But you can communicate it with just a few very, very subtle changes in the color that you're using for the background. Like, look at this blue right here, right? And then look at that color right there. It's like very, very slightly darker and probably a tiny bit more green. But there's so much that your eye picks up and translates with that. And then you add in a little bit of highlights there, and then your brain perceives it as leaves. And there's me again checking the values. And I like it. I like it. So, moving forward, I'm just kind of cleaning up a few things. I decided to go back in and just darken a few of the values, like that one right there. Let me go back and see that. Like, see this right here? Look, I just took that away because I wanted that to be a lot darker. That way it just helps reinforce it. That's closer to you. And again, that's really easy to edit once you're on the lighten layer, because if you make your shadows dark and then lighten them, you can always go back. Moving on. And you can see I'm dropping that black mask over top of it too, just to see how it looks in black and white. Now what I'm doing is I'm going into bloom. Now bloom is something that I really like to do. This is kind of like some of the final rendering effects that I like to put on. And usually I can get away with doing it with like a very desaturated color. And then all you do is you create another layer over top of it. See here, I call it bloom. And then the layer property is set to hard light. Some people use linear dodge and other stuff like that, but I really like hard light because it looks cool. So that is what I use. And so yeah, I'm just using basically like a saturated, or is it desaturated? I think desaturated gives you a little bit more of a realistic bloom. So I think eventually I go in and I desaturate it. But yeah, you can see how I kind of trimmed the corners there to kind of give it a little bit of like a light shaft effect there. And again, going back to what I first said when I started this, notice how the lantern appears much more brighter because of the darkness behind it. You know, if I would have left it a bright yellow background behind it like it was originally, that lantern would not look nearly as bright. And then on top of that, it's affecting everything else around here. So you can see it's actually one of the main light sources here. It's almost like, it almost looks a little too bright to be coming from that little lantern, but we'll say it's a magic lantern, because it is. Who knows, maybe that's Maokai's life force in there. So, and you can see I put a little bit of bloom on his eyes there. Basically what bloom is the light is refracting, or I guess it's hitting all the little particles and atmosphere around it before it gets to your eye. And basically it creates like a little ring or a halo around it. And it's a really cool kind of rendering effect that I like to do on a lot of my pieces before I finish them up. Kind of lightening up a few of those shadows. I don't end up finishing this arm or the little sapling just because I wanted to hurry up and get this done so it wasn't done, or so the daily didn't release like at 8 o'clock in the evening. Because I know a few of you just can't stand that. Can you? You just can't wait. Can't be patient. But that's okay. I don't blame you. I'm impatient to get these out as well, because I'm excited to help you guys out and get my techniques out. So yeah, so basically all I'm doing now is I'm going in and just kind of doing a little bit of material passes. I mean, it's not anything legendary, you know, but this is more of, I personally really like this more relaxed style. I feel it's almost more of a mix between like comic and with a little bit of realistic elements thrown in. And then you can always go in and render more materials as you like. In fact, I'd really like to do a full daily on just materials, because heaven knows I need help with that as well. So you can see now, this is our finished piece right here. So I want to go through and basically just show you exactly what's been happening. And what is this? Oh, that's the extra layer I made for draw overs. Okay, so basically the easiest way to make this layer is just make a layer over top of everything, and then grab black, and then hit Shift F5, and then that'll make it color the whole thing. And basically just choose foreground color, because it's, you know, the black. Hit OK. It'll fill it with black, and then you set it to color in the layer properties. Basically what that does is it turns your entire piece to black and white, and you can clearly see what the values are. And this really helps you out when you're trying to communicate silhouette, form, light, all that kind of stuff, and balance as well. And your focal point should always be the areas where there's really high amounts of contrast. So like focal points are going to be here, here, here especially, and here. So you'll notice there's almost like this little bit of arc, this little arc that you'll kind of follow with your eyes. And I didn't do that intentionally, but I will say that I did, so I look smart. So yes, I am leading you around this circle. It's almost like you follow this flow here. And the flow was intentional. I really liked this little kind of curvy, spirally thing that's happening in here. So you take that away. And you can see basically the colors that I've chosen. It's a lot of cool colors. A lot of like this purpley kind of thing in the background. And look at how desaturated they are. See? There's not a lot of saturated colors, even in the eye. The most saturated it gets is right there. I really like to saturate things once I go to the shadows, like in here. This is fairly saturated. You know, and see, it's like red. It's red in there, and it makes it look a little bit more alive. See, as you come over here into like the tree stump, like these are like really dark. So you get close to black there. And then, yeah, there's the bloom layer. What else did I want to talk about? Oh, yeah, and just remember, like, the best way to communicate form is even just the slightest amount of change in the darkness of the shadows will communicate what's closest to you. Like you can see that this arm is definitely closer. And then right behind it, there's almost like this layer. It's almost like a thing that's encasing, you know, him, and then he's behind it, and it makes it look really cool. Also, what's helping to show this is the rim light that's happening off of this lantern. See how it affects like half of his head, or it's like right on the top of his head. But here, on the arm, it's only the very edge. And that shows that this arm is further in front, and the light is affecting less of it. Like if the light was coming down here, it would start to confuse you a little bit. You'd be like, oh, okay, well that arm is catching as much light as, you know, his head is. You know, and that it's better to just do this to communicate more of the form. If that makes sense. Wow, yeah. I'm not the best at explaining this. I'm not the best at formulating the words to basically describe my technique without saying basically a lot. I don't even know how many times I've said it. Can I get a counter on that? Like, post in the comments how many times I said basically in this video. That would be great. Thank you. And I think that's pretty much it. So that covers just basic values, how you can easily look at your values by creating this layer over top of it, setting it to color, black layer, and then setting it to color. That'll help you to see the values, and squint your eyes. Always squint your eyes so you can see. If you can still tell what's going on in the picture when you squint your eyes, that means that it is properly balanced and clear picture, and that is always good. So also just keep an eye out for your focal points, wherever the most contrast and brightest parts are. It's usually where people are going to look first. And let's see, flow. I mean, here, let me draw on the flow really quick. Basically what I wanted people to do when they looked at this. Another bonus! Why not? And after that, we will wrap up the daily. Okay, so when I wanted people to look at this, I actually didn't want them to look at Maokai first. I really actually wanted people to look here, right? Being this is the highest point of contrast. Then you would kind of follow it down here to this guy. Say, oh, look at that cute little guy. And then you kind of follow this up to here and be like, oh my gosh, there's a giant tree guy, you know? And then you kind of look over here and kind of follow this back up around here. So it almost create like this little circle effect. And then you kind of even follow it down here and then back up into it. So you can notice there's a lot of things that are pointing back up and curving around. You know, see all these shapes in here? This is all very cool stuff because it keeps you within, even this curves around. It all keeps you within this danger zone. I mean the awesome zone. So yeah, that's basically a little bit of the flow that's going on in the piece. And I guarantee you, if you start using that, it will make your drawings like so much cooler to look at. Like it works so well with anatomy, compositions, backgrounds, all that stuff. Oh yeah, the other thing is the background. And on top of that, we wanted to reinforce that we're looking up at him. So look, all of these trees are going up here like this. So it helps our simple minds to understand what's going on. So, with that, we will wrap up the KNKL Show, episode 44. It is really hot in this room. I have my makeshift swamp cooler over there. It's really awesome. I'll have to show you that up close sometime. But it's basically a rag thrown over like some little wire frame thing and then a fan blowing through it with some like a water dish underneath it. It's epic. It's so ghetto, it's Geppetto. So, with that, we are out. Thank you for tuning in to episode 44. Tomorrow is the KNKL pool party. Awesome. So be there. Ysera, 10 o'clock server. Thumbs up if you like it. Thumbs down if you don't. I'm Kienan Lafferty, and I will see you guys next week.